Stephanie, you
Hi, can you hear me?
all good, thank you. Right, it is 7:03 p.m. on March 1st, 2022. We'll call to order this regular meeting for March of the Reading Board of Education. All members are present, including Stephanie Olson, who is present remotely. First item of business on the agenda is the consent agenda, which contains the approval of minutes of January 27th, February 1st, and February 3rd, as well as the February 22nd, 2022 joint meeting. I'm going to hold the February 1st and February 22nd meeting to the consent agenda. If there's no objection, we'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda as of January 27th and February 3rd. Second, John, any discussion? All in favor? Stephanie, any objection?
No objection.
Which brings us to the February 1st minutes. The reason I pulled it is to make a correction on page 2, which refers to the Park Club Planning Working Group, which should be the ARPA, ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act Planning Group. That would be my one requested change in those minutes. Any other questions or comments on the February 1st minutes? Your left hand is still where? And above to correct Shular's last name, D-A-N-A, no R. If there are no further comments or a motion to approve those minutes as amended. Mike, second, Julie. For discussion, all in favor?
Yep. Okay.
Passes unanimously. I would ask that we pass the February 22nd minutes entirely because there's a complicated procedural section with respect to one of the motions that I think we want to take some time to clean up that we can come back to in our next meeting, which will bring us to item 3, public comment. Any members of the public wish to be heard, please signify so by raising your hand and then state your name and streets.
Stephanie Ortegon, 28 Glen Hill Road. I just speak from here. Oh, I don't have to stand up. Okay. So, good evening, Board of Ed members and others. I'm going to be reading a letter on behalf of all of the kindergarten paras at Reading Elementary School. So while your vision of being a kindergarten para might be akin to making copies, walking children to and from class, zipping coats, and opening cheese sticks, anyone who has done this job for a matter of weeks would tell you that those tasks are just a small fraction of the responsibilities that fall on a kindergarten parent. After a week in this job, you will most likely need to know how to clear a classroom when a child is acting in an unsafe manner, or how to deal with a child having an accident moments before getting on their bus to go home. You may even need to sit next to the same student during instructional times to repeat or alter instructions multiple times because they are incapable of guiding themselves through the task independently. In any given day, kindergarten paras provide support in many ways, like working with students on instructional aspects directed by the teacher. That includes learning addition, subtraction, how to form numbers and letters, and learning letter sounds. Moreover, how to put those sounds together or break them apart to learn to read, write, and spell. Although our badge and credentials do not say teacher, we are teaching students. We are teaching them academics, as well as how to be respectful, kind, and contribute in a positive manner to their classroom community. Currently, we arrive 30 minutes after our students and leave 30 minutes before they are dismissed. For nearly an hour a day, we cannot help our students or support our teachers during some of the most chaotic times of the day. The kindergarten para position has been a revolving door of qualified staff. You may ask yourselves why that is, but we feel you may already know. The kindergarten para position is exactly 18 minutes a day short of being full-time, and in turn does not offer medical benefits. Mind you, it is the only position, the only job at RES that is that way. All other paras in the building are full-time and receive medical benefits. While many of the paraeducators in the building would admit they are well underpaid for what they do, at least medical benefits make the job a little bit more attractive. New hires for any paraeducator position in the ER9 district make $14 an hour. So on July 1st, we can proudly claim we are earning minimum wage. We know that the RES administration requested that the kindergarten para position be full-time with benefits for the upcoming 22-23 school year. However, we were pulled from the budget early on before the board as a whole had any say in the matter. We would like to make it known that last year, 4 of the 5 kindergarten paras left the position for other positions in the building because they would gain medical benefits. In addition, 2 of the 4 vacancies were not filled this year until 2 months after the school year began. It's easy to tell somebody to go look for another job, and I can assure you all of the kindergarten paras, as well as many of the paras in the building, would have no problem finding one if they looked. But ask yourselves, what if enough paras from RES and JRMS looked elsewhere? Then who would do the work? There are already vacant positions in the ER9 district as well as surrounding areas. These positions are not being filled. The staff who has worked and is currently working in the kindergarten wing is of the highest caliber. These are bachelor's and master's educated adults. Some have managed upwards of 30 employees and helped run small businesses. They are compassionate people who are willing to stay late or come early or step in case a classroom teacher may be absent. At some point, if the pay and the benefits don't meet the effort being put into the job, you will fail to hire people or find quality people who have stepped up to do the job thus far. So we are asking publicly for you to reconsider making the kindergarten para position full-time status with medical benefits for the 2022-2023 school year. And we kindly ask for a prompt response by March 22nd of this month. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Is that any additional public comment?
I have a letter from our teachers that we support. My name is Lynn Valenti. I'm at 20 Lonetown Road. The letter is dated March 1st of 2022. To who it may concern, we are writing to express our support of the petition of equity being filed by the RES kindergarten paraprofessionals. The kindergarten paraprofessionals certainly perform all of the duties of full-time paraeducators and, as such, should be justly compensated. The duties have continuously increased over the years, yet the hours have remained just under the full-time threshold. It would be beneficial to increase the position to full-time as it is becoming increasingly difficult to find qualified candidates for this position due to the limited salary and lack of insurance benefits. We hope you will give thorough consideration to this request. We would be happy to answer any additional questions in person or via phone. Thank you. Salita Ballard, RES kindergarten team leader, Melissa Matola, RES kindergarten teacher, Lauren O'Neill, RES kindergarten teacher, Tom Faraletto, RES kindergarten teacher, and Stephanie Boyd, RES kindergarten teacher.
Thank you, Lynn. Additional public comment? Or did see Mike? Thought I heard. Nothing from Mike tonight. All right, thank you. Board member comment.
I'll just say thank you to both of you for coming today and sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it. And I have a huge respect for you. As a parent who used to have a kindergartner, I really appreciate it.
Additional board member comments. Brings us on to administrative reports. Dr. McMahon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, excuse me. I think we will start with our administrators. So Melissa, if you don't mind, can you share your administrative reports for RA? Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I do have a little more to share than last month, being that last month was my second day on the job. I can officially say that I am a month into the role. So February was truly the month of love at RES. We kicked off the month, the week of Valentine's Day with a spirit week, which included show your love for comfortable clothes. So their staff and students were able to wear their pajamas to school, and it concluded with show your love for RES, where our staff and students showed their RES pride by wearing spirit wear. In conjunction with the PTA, Month of Love concluded with PTA partnering with us by providing students with these beautiful hearts where Students were able to decorate with positive words of affirmation and kindness and beautiful pictures that were displayed all through the halls of RES, which was lovely to see. Something new at RES is our new newsletter. So we opted to start streamlining our Tuesday Newsday communication with our Sunday memo to families. The new name of our newsletter is the Rocky Weekly Roundup. Rocky Raccoon is actually our school mascot. We were very fortunate that one of our kindergarten parents actually created our mascot for us. The newsletter logo for us. With our first week, we had over 700 views. So we've gotten also positive feedback from families as well. Yesterday kicked off Read Across America. Officially, Read Across America is March 2nd. And this year's theme is Create and Celebrate Diverse Readers. So we are coinciding Read Across America with Women in History Month. And so a big shout out to Tony D'Agostino, one of our reading specialists, and Kelly Blesky, second grade teacher, who came up with daily themes to celebrate women in history. Yesterday was learning all about aviators. So students wore stars and airplanes and astronaut gear as they learned about all the famous female astronauts and pilots in history. And to conclude the month, we also participated in the annual Kids Heart Challenge, which took place during our physical education classes. Students learned all about heart health and collected donations from loved ones that went to the American Heart Association. And I'm proud to report we collected $14,000 that went to the American Heart Association for that. Any questions?
And Melissa, congratulations on making it a month.
1 month.
Megan, would you like to provide a report for Sunbury Middle School?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So yesterday we had our second advisory lesson since we started advisory. So we've transitioned from our home base, which was a 10-minute moment in our period 3 IE period, and we've made it a more consistent advisory. We're able to deliver lessons to influence the climate and culture of our building. So yesterday we had an advisory lesson that focused on conversation skills for students and leading with their heart, building empathy, and looking at perspective. It went really well. As I said in my letter to parents this week, we're going to come up with some like common words that we might use to ask kids to take another perspective. So we might ask students to do a 180, which means we want them to look at something from someone else, from the other side, from the other point of view. We might also ask students to try again when maybe they've delivered some words in an unkind way. We might ask them to say it in a different way, or if a behavior that wasn't ideal in that situation, we want them to try better again next time. So our next advisory will be, we're doing Friday advisories. Our next advisory will be on March 11th to recognize Say Something Week, which celebrates the importance of trusted adults and upstanders in our community. And students will also be doing a read aloud of Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson. So pairing the Say Something theme with the Read Across America fun. We have some exciting news. If you came in through the front door, you'll see that we have a new water fountain. So with all the well work that went on, we turned on our water fountain in the front hall. At first, it really started as a splash pad. So we had to have some learning because it is definitely new and unique. There's a bottle counter so the kids can recognize how many water bottles they're saving. I always thought you had to put a bottle under it to make it start, but you really just have to wave your hand over the sensor. So we've all learned a little this week. So we're eventually going to start updating our water fountain throughout the building. So, and I have been drinking it for 2 weeks, and here I stand. I fill it every morning, at noon, and in the afternoon, and all is going really well. So we're very excited about that upgrade to January. Our 8th graders are also preparing for their move up to high school, so they met with their high school counselors and they've talked about course selection. And we're very excited for that. We also had a kindness week this month, from February 14th to February 17th. We celebrate National School Counseling Week from February 4th to February 11th. And our students participated in a food drive where they donated lots of food and pantry supplies to children in need in the Danbury area, which we're very excited to fill the back of Miss Palolo's car as she delivered those goods. We're also super excited. I can't remember if I said this last time, but Seussical is official. So we are going to have our spring musical in early May. So we had auditions and the students have been made aware of their roles. And we're just really excited. I have to say, I'm so impressed by what this group of folks can transform that gym into. And we have some people from Fairfield Theater coming also helping us. And they were so impressed to see the transformation that occurs in the gym. So I can't wait to see it. And I think the bright colors of Seussical are just going to be magical. I also want to celebrate Mr. Holmes, which you know is a new science teacher on our 8th grade team. Mr. Holmes also, he brought Cyber Patriot to us earlier this year. And he also was the man behind the invention convention making its debut. I don't know if we had it before, so I'm going to say debut for now in recent years, where we had 8 students. Mr. Fine, thank you for being one of our judges. And it was very exciting to see all of their inventions. As I said to the kids, so many of them were Shark Tank worthy, right? They were pretty impressive, yes. I especially like the one with the spatula, this attachment that goes on a spatula. My spatula always gets caught in the drawer, you know, so this is very impressive. So that was quite a celebration as we celebrated kids last Thursday. Kids have also participated in the recycling, Housatonic Valley Recycling Contest, and found really, really great ways to demonstrate the positive impact that composting can have. And as you walked in, I don't know if you came in that door, but you would have seen a bright and shiny new gymnasium floor. So we've had that refurbished after many years. It's getting a little slick and slippery. So good news for us. It's not safer for the kids, but we did remind them, we let them get away with wearing their boots and other shoes, but we really said, we need to go back to sneakers only. So good times at John Reed. Thanks, everybody.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you just give me, and I'm so sorry, I should probably know this already, but just the background on the advisory program?
Sure.
Before, what's the goal of the program?
Sure. So advisory should be a time that students can identify an adult that they feel a connection to in the building. So we had home base that was 10 minutes, and home base would start with 10 minutes at the start of period 3. Okay. Which happens every period 3 is also our intervention and extension period. That 10 minutes sometimes doesn't allow, well, often doesn't allow us to deliver a significant lesson to achieve the instruction that we want to provide the culture and climate of the building, right? To unify us all around same goals. So what we did was we took those 10 minutes and we essentially said, we're going to have an every other Friday advisory period during that same period 3. But we're being much more intentional and purposeful about that time and the common lessons that every student is going to experience with their teacher. Students were at first very concerned, right? They wanted to keep home base, and I heard them. Then I had to dig in and understand why they wanted to keep home base. And they felt like if we didn't keep home base, we weren't going to get a break. So what we explained is that you still have that IE time, which for some students, it's time for them to get work done. It's time for them to meet with the teacher. If they decide to meet with their science teacher that period or a math teacher or whatever. So it's students recognize that they still have that break time and a little bit of downtime. Sometimes it's to catch up. Sometimes it's to do something in a desired area that they want to improve on. So we're really looking forward to advisory, and then that's how we would start the year next year as well. So we wouldn't have that kind of change mid-year. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we're eager to move into our budget discussions. So we only have one more administrative report, which is Mr. Petrozelli is going to bring the budget update summary to life.
So we have a January budget summary, so just, I know that the board was concerned on where we're going to land the year, so I'm going to incorporate that into, as I go through this, and I see Bobby here, so I want to thank her and her counterpart Sue for giving us the time for digging into some of these line items, and we're going to have to do some more going forward too. So I'm pretty comfortable with where we're going to land with the information we have, but we'll get more comfortable next month also, because we have some unknowns that we have to dig into a little bit further. And then also Jen special ed will be able to give us a number as we get farther along in the year. So if we look at the first sheet, if we were to add up the 102 to 111, which is really our salary. So we have a breakage amount there of 25,515, which means we're gonna have a savings that we're gonna bring to the end of the year. So if we look at it in a block like that, that's really how we want to look at that. If you look at 112, which are salaries non-certified, and you look at the negative number and aren't going to expend it, that's because we actually saw the check today. That's our ESSER and IDEA grants that haven't been applied there yet, but they will be applied, and when we look at the next report, that'll look a lot cleaner. The 114 is our stipends, and our 115 is longevity, bus duty, chaperone money, so there's no opportunity in those line items there. If we were to flip over, again, the 116 is our curriculum work. There's going to be teacher workshops there, so we plan on spending that money, and we'll take a closer look at that also as the month progresses. But as of right now, that money is gonna be spent, as is the overtime and for the non-certified, which is really our custodians and secretaries. If we get down, if we block together the 121 to 124, that's really all our subs, and we do have an opportunity there because this year we're seeing fewer long-term absences, hopefully because we're at the end of the pandemic. And we also know that it might look like we're a little underspent there, but we also know that there's more absences that happen at the end of the year in the springtime and earlier on in the year. So we think we've identified another 30,000 there to add with the breakage amount. If we keep going down, no savings in the nurses' salaries, no savings in 129, 130 that we can see now. The secretary's salaries, if you look at that,
Go back to the nurses for a second.
128.
128, you said you don't expect any savings. We're year to date in RES 24,000, we expect to spend 27,000 in the last 5 months of the year.
Yes, we do.
In addition to 7.
Yes. There's 2 nurses there, Chris.
I'm just wondering why it's going to be spent at a higher clip on the back 5 months than 0.7 months.
I believe the second nurse was hired around this year.
Yes.
So it started the year with 1 nurse in RES and the second nurse was hired.
But
So
we
that
still
might
expect this, we still expect the 2 combined to still be 68.
I will get a better breakdown of that for you and get that to you. So that's 120.
Chris, you got 4,400 from 1.5 to 11.6.
Well, I'm just thinking that we're 7 months, or we're more than halfway through the year, and we've spent less than half of it, expect to spend more than half of the back side.
But the burn rate. The first 2 months are.
Right, yeah, it could.
So if we go down to, or we flip the page to 135, the special education secretary salaries, there's some, there's a reclass being made there for one of the secretaries. So again, that's been made and it looks a lot cleaner if we were to look at a up-to-date report. Custodian salaries, nothing to speak of here. No opportunities here on the rest of the page. If we flip over 261, this is workers' comp again. The $2,700 is taking as opportunity. I just don't know why they budgeted 60, but the expenditures came in at 57. The medical, there's no opportunity there. Other employee benefits.
On that question, Scott, on the budgeting 60 for workers' comp, do we have the actual number for fiscal 23? If we budget the actual for fiscal 23, or we have a placeholder?
No, I am 99% sure that we have the exact number from the town, because I think that comes from the town, but that's not a placeholder, and I'll double check that number and make sure it's accurate. We go down to the other professional services. I think we're going to spend all that. That's predominantly special education, or a big majority of that special education. We go down to the lawn care. This wasn't budgeted last year. I think we all know the story with the lawn care. Flip over to the maintenance contracts. We're going to dig into those a little bit more to see if there's an opportunity there, but right now we think we're going to have all that spend. I want to talk about 431, the cleaning and repair services, because you're going to see that we're over budget 10,452 on this report. It's actually increased, and this is all due to the number 2 and 3 well. We had unplanned expenses of 24,800, and also for the water testing. We have regular water testing budgeted, but because of the issue with the well, we have 11,000 of unplanned water testing there. So that's gonna, we're thinking we're gonna be at 34,947 over budget on that line due to the well, which is reflective of where we think we're gonna go.
And when you said that line item, you mean the 431 or the 431?
I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't hear.
You said you expect to be 35,000 overdrawn just on 431-23?
Correct.
Okay. And 431-24 looks to be underspent.
Yes, at this, we have, that's a question that we're investigating still.
So we don't know on the 431 generally whether it's going to wash itself out.
We do not know at this point, but we will know soon. The student transportation and special education transportation, we have a breakdown. We're going to be 26,219 over budget there, and that was due to a student's expenses were a little bit more than we anticipated when we did the budget. But we're pretty comfortable with that number now. Again, there's a risk there that something could happen between now and the end of the year, but right now we're comfortable with that number.
Do we know if that overage is somebody who qualifies for excess cost reimbursement or not? And whether there's an offset against that 26?
That came up in the conversation today, and we're looking into it.
Just to point out here that student transportation and special education is combined in 510. In next year's budget, we've actually separated. Okay, yes.
Again, the property insurance and the liability insurance, you know, they just came in more than what they were budgeted. So again, we have that risk and opportunity in the year. We flip over. No tuition in private school, that's our health placements there. And we'll have a little bit more line of sight as the year progresses.
Is that accurate for the RES line? Tuition private school? Looks like it's under budget in 2000s.
We think these are pretty accurate today. They are.
I mean, Laura's question is an excellent one. It's $350,000 that's either encumbered nor expensed, and we're sitting here in February. If there's an outplacement that we know tuition is going to be due, should it be encumbered on a schedule? It's hanging out there like it's an unknown outplacement. It's $350,000.
No, point taken.
I can find out why it hasn't been encumbered, but I'm looking at a spreadsheet now with a breakdown of all of our students in different grades going to specific programs, and I have data here to kind of back up the 352,000. But your question about whether it's encumbered or not, it's a good one. And we can certainly clarify that.
So, you saying that you have data to show you this, not necessarily.
Yes, Scott and I talked to Jen DeConte about this line, and we asked if there were any opportunities. And Jen provided a kind of a spreadsheet which has some student-specific information on. So we could probably provide you with more information about tuition, but we're going to have to change the way in which we have the data. But you know, we have information here that shows that there's no opportunities in tuition.
Okay, so the monthly spend is gonna go from 2,500 to 70,000.
The backside must.
Right.
Right, and it won't even be, it's not generated monthly. It could be, one student could be 70,000, another student could be 84,000, it could be in lump sums.
One school's on a trimester basis and others on a monthly basis, that kind of thing.
Right.
Are we still comfortable with excess costs running at 200,000?
Did you hear that question, Jen? That was a question about excess costs and where we are now.
I think we put in the excess cost in the budget. I think our excess cost actually went down from last year. This year, let me go and look at
Okay.
I want to make sure that we can reliably expect around 225.
Yes, Chris, I think we can. It's formula based, that number, and came up with it based on history. And so I think we're comfortable.
Right, I mean, it's not,
If the costs go up, obviously the money we get back will go up a little bit.
right, and that's kind of backs into the questions about 563 and how firm those numbers are. Because that relates to how firm 564 is, and the increase in 511 is impacting it also.
At what points in the year do you see excess costs? Is it usually around now and July? Right. I see it.
Which is the first check. Soon.
Yeah.
So conferences and travel, we think there might be a little bit of opportunity there. We're gonna get a little bit more rigor around those numbers and put them into where we think we're gonna land. If we look at 611 instructional supplies, you're gonna have to flip the sheet and look at textbooks, because if you look at textbooks, we have negative numbers. So this is just a reclass issue that has been done. So they kind of, when we look at this for February, if you look at this next meeting, we won't see those negative numbers there. It's just a reclass issue. We have to flip the page.
And we're going to see a transfer report on that.
Well, we're not transferring budget dollars, so we're just reclassing expenses. So,
If it sounds like you're transferring $25,000 from 641 to 611.
in expenses. So do I have to do a transfer in front of the board for expenses?
Okay.
Or are you saying we're just posting them to a different account than we have in the past?
Yeah, we just
Versus-
when we paid them, we paid them out of the wrong account. We figured out what the right account was and making
Oh,
a journal
A
entry.
purchase order hit the textbook account instead of the 611.
All right.
It's a journal entry issue, not a, we need to move money to cover an expense.
Exactly.
yeah.
So, I don't have, how have you done that?
I think it's probably something along the lines of a memo that explains what happened. So have a formal transfer.
Absolutely do that. You know, this is full disclosure and full transparency. It was just a journal entry. And again, I thought if we were moving and transferring budget dollars to cover something
I
else.
mean, I
that
guess the
would
question is,
absolutely-
are we transferring budget dollars now that we paid out of the wrong account? I think we technically are. It's to cover a mistake, not to cover a change in circumstance.
I think we're just
It's just a journal
reclassifying.
entry.
Yeah.
I'll come up with a memo.
You know, we can.
Or we paid it to the wrong account.
You either see a memo, kind of explain what happened here.
Right, I just don't love going from one budget item to the next, I mean, the numbers just change without a transfer, it's like why?
Okay.
Absolutely. We can move up to the next page. We're looking at a little bit closer into the equipment for the non-instructional and instructional. As soon as we get that, I'll incorporate that into where we think we're going to land. There might be some opportunity there, but from our preliminary looking into this, not a lot.
So we have $20,000 planned in non-instructional equipment purchases for John Reed for the back half of the year.
That's what they're looking into now, Chris. I don't have a concrete answer for you. So when we look at where we are versus, and one of these numbers will be in our health insurance when we go over our slides here. We're looking for our forecast with everything that we know right now is 72,974 under budget, over budget, excuse me, in the red. But we have some unknown that we're doing more research on, which come out to a little over 114,000. So we think we're going to come in the year flat with up to $25,000 surplus. And right now, with everything that we dug into, I'm pretty comfortable with that number.
So the projection as we sit here today is to spend down 99.9% roughly.
More or less. Yes.
Questions on this report? Want to talk about the health plan now, Jason, with more?
We have that as part of a slide deck that we can share as part of the upgrade. Okay. It's more visual, so.
Any other questions for Scott with respect to the monthly report? Brings all the administrative reports for tonight. Any board committee reports for tonight? Hearing none, we'll move right into the 2022-2023 operating budget. I understand Dr. McKinnon has a series of updates for us. Since the last time.
Bear with me, I'll share my screen. So I can. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So hopefully you can see that it is streaming from home as well. This is our budget workshop fourth presentation, and we thought we would just provide a brief recap of how we've got to this point so far, and kind of some of the changes that we've made in some of the three other budget workshops. If you recall, we presented the superintendent proposed budget on January 21st. And at the time, we were at a 4.94% increase, which was $24,200,885. Prior to the budget workshop one, we made a transportation technical adjustment, moving our transportation contract from 3% to 2%, or just acknowledging that it was a technical edit. And that resulted in a budget reduction of $19,572. At Budget Workshop 2, we had lengthy discussions about technology, and at that time, we offset the purchases of approximately 75 Chromebooks using ESSER funds. We talked about how in the last year's budget, we had field trips were not budgeted, and Ms. Ward talked about budgeting field trips in our district-wide cost center, and we removed field trips and had a discussion about funding field trips in the way they've been funded in Reading in the past. One of the requests from the January 21st budget was for a midship custodian, and we removed that request, made additional technical edits, which resulted in a reduction of $110,908. So far, our budget request has gone from $24,200,885 down to $24,070,405. That brings us to where we are at the moment, which is at 4.37%. And if you recall, there was a central office, a joint board of education meeting with the three boards, and we made a minor edit to the central office budget of $2,669.49. We're sorry, which brought us down to 4.37. And there's one other change. In the previous three workshops, we talked about a facilities manager, which was budgeted at 0.3, and we mentioned it as a possible reduction. We took the liberty of changing that from a 0.3 to a 0.2, which is a change of 17,400, which brings us down to where we are today, 4.32%. So over the past few weeks, we've moved from 4.94% down to a 4.32%. One of the things we're going to talk about tonight is a menu of further reductions, and we're pleased to report the two items that you see in green are recommendations that we think the board are going to be quite pleased with. We're able to reduce the type 1 bus next year. The type 1 bus is an amount of about $517 per day. Type 1 bus is the biggest bus you see on the road, transporting our students. We asked our bus company for a student to take a look at the routes for this year and next year. And as a result of that research, we're able to save one bus. If you look at $517 multiplied by 180 school days, that's approximately $90,000. First student is suggesting that bus is shared right now between Reading and Region 9, where it represents a 2/3 of the savings for Reading, which is a $61,515 savings of proposed budget for next year. And a third of that, the 90,000, approximately 30,000 will represent the savings for the Region 9 board. So when we provide an update for the Region 9 board on Thursday night, they'll be pleased that we've found 30,000 savings. So D'Agostino can make a note of that, sitting in the audience. We had some conversations with Mrs. DeConte this week about the item in the budget known as known outplacements, and we're pleased to reduce the known outplacement by $98,000. So those two savings alone are significant savings, and we'll talk about what the impact is moving the budget from 4.32% and where that takes us. There are other possible cuts that we can talk about, which include building level discretionary cuts in the amount of $10,000, professional learning and curriculum work possibly for $10,000. We could delay some hardware replacements, which would be another $13,000. We could delay some facilities projects, which is minor roof repairs in the amount of $8,200. And in least order, in terms of priority, would be reducing the possible section at Reading Elementary School. Currently, there are 24 sections, 5 sections per grade level. There's a retirement at John Reed Middle School next year. There might be an arrangement where we cut a section at RES, that teacher would go to John Reed Middle School, and we would possibly reduce the section based, we can talk about the impact of class size. We have a slide on that later this evening. And what that impact would be from 25 sections to 24 sections, and that would be a savings of $67,000. But all of these examples we can discuss near the end of the presentation. We've developed a sandbox for you, so you can play around with what different changes would look like, and that would happen in real time based on our master roll-up sheet in the Google Sheets. So we do want to talk a little bit about our health claims account and the relationship between claims, our operating budget, and our health benefits account. So there is a relationship between these 3 areas, and they have implications for where we end with our health benefits account, our operating budget, and how much claims we're spending monthly now in claims. And also, this is an important conversation for next year as well. So we want to talk about these 3 areas. So first, we'll talk a little bit about our health benefits account. We started the year in the with a beginning balance of negative $89,187. The board made additional contributions in October and in December of $300,000 and $268,341 respectively from unexpended funds. And that's why the conversation about unexpended funds is critically important, because you can see here that you transferred $568,341 into the health benefits account at those 2 points. Our January balance in the health benefits account is a negative $83,500. However, that's not the full picture. The health benefits account is like a checking account. It has deposits and withdrawals. So currently the balance is $83,500. However, between now and the end of the year, there are various deposits and withdrawals. We expect about $250,260 from expected employee contributions, another $26,289 from retiree contributions. We expect about approximately $175,000 from an expected claim return. And there are various admin fees, which are about $20,000 per month. And if you look at 5 months remaining, that's a negative of about $100,000. So if you look at where we started the year, where we are at the end of January at $83,500, plus these anticipated deposits and withdrawals, our anticipated fund balance by the time we reach the end of the school year is approximately $268,049.
But before you consider additional budget board contributions or claims.
That's right. I'm going to take you there next. Right. And so again, getting back to this slide, we just talked about the top gear in the cog, which is the health benefits account. Now we're going to talk about the operating budget and healthcare claims. So that was the health benefits account. Here is the operating budget. So you can see here that in line 270 and 271, we budgeted $2,483,927 less pay in lieu of insurance. We've withdrawn $1,569,803 to pay claims from July 2021 to currently, and we currently have $914,123 remaining in our operating budgets in those 2 accounts. So when you look at healthcare claims, the average monthly claims from the beginning of the year to the end of January is $307,545. The January claim, when we presented to you recently, was $399,143, and we were very concerned about that number. I think we explained at the point at that time there were 5 invoices for the month of January. However, we do have some good news that our estimated February claims are $235,000, which is trending in the right direction. So if we look at the average monthly claims to date, which is approximately 300,000, our January claims is 399, our February claims are about 235,000. We're comfortable with the projection for the next 5 months of the school year that our monthly claims will be approximately 250,000. If there are 5 months left at 250,000, that means possible claims that we have between now and the end of the year is 1,250,000. So if we put those 3 gears together, the health benefits account, what we've budgeted in our budget, plus our claims, you can kind of see putting these 3 together. This is all the data on one slide. Just trying to move this. Okay, so again, what we budgeted for in the light green on the left-hand slide is we started the year at 2,483,000. We've withdrawn 1.5 million. We currently have 914,000. In the health benefits account, we started the year at a negative number, negative 89,185. There are 2 additional contributions, significant, 568,000. Our anticipated balance at the end of the year, as I just explained, with the various deposits and withdrawals, is 268,000. So therefore, if you look at the 2 circles, the 914,000 that we have in our operating budget, the 268,000, which is anticipated remaining in our health benefits account, the available pot of money is $1,182,172. However, if you look at our claims, now we can start to see the relationship between the health benefits account, what we've budgeted, and where our claims are falling. As I said before, if we are budgeting at $250,000 per month, there are 5 months. The possible claims are 1,250,000. What we have available based on those 2 areas is $1,182,172. So our potential exposure is negative 67,828. So there's a sliding scale here, which looks like this. If our monthly claims are in the green that you see in the screen there at 250,000, and our available funds are $1,182,172, then we have a negative exposure at the end of the year at negative $67,828. If our monthly claims came in at $236,000, then we would have 0 exposure. If our monthly claims came in at $300,000, then you'd see that we would finish the year with a negative $317,828. And if we finished where the January claims were, which were significantly higher, and let's say we said it was $350,000 per month, then we'd be ending the year at negative $567,828. The last year claim average was 287,000. The last 3 years was 241,000. I think, to be conservative, we could probably estimate the 250,000 per month claim average, which would leave us at a negative 67,000 at the end of the year. So that's kind of the summary. We provided it to you in kind of a visual format to kind of help explain that confusing health benefits report that we've seen for the last couple of months.
Is it spending usually heavier the first half of the year or the first 7 months?
The spending is usually a little bit heavier in the back part of the year because people have met their deductible, and so spending could go up. However, there are some high claimants, and we feel like those high claimants have already met the stop loss. So it's hard to tell.
You're still comfortable?
I think we're comfortable with 250 at this point. And we're just going to have to monitor it.
If I take the last 6 years, last 5 months of the year, the average is 239. That's why we use 250 just to.
I would say that looking at last year is a bit of a concern, but in the ebbs and flows of medical services availability over the past year, it's kind of tough to project anything off of it.
Right. So that's where we are with health insurance. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, one of our potential reductions could be reduction of section at RES. So Dr. Pearson, you guys will talk a little bit about kind of where we are with class size right now. This is not something I don't think we need to decide this tonight. This may not be an option where we would go deep enough into the menu, but we just wanted to bring this to your attention. And then again, we'll get to the sandbox in a moment and we'll start each one to get context.
So this is a slide that we shared with you a couple of meetings ago, and it provides you the information regarding class sections in size both this year and what we anticipate next year. So the board has some decisions to make. We can remain flat at 25 sections, which is what is currently in the budget. We could reduce a section, and you see the options there. Or there's been some conversation about adding a section. We've shared with you intervention information. We know that our students require more intervention this year, both in terms of their academic needs and also their social and emotional needs. A number of students, particularly at the early primary grades, who really have not experienced typical school life for some time. And that's required much more attention from our teachers, from our support staff, from our administrators to really help support our children so that they can learn how to be at school, learn how to be a good peer, learn how to be a good student. And that has certainly taken time from our teachers. So of particular concern has been our second grade cohort, the third grade next year. And last year, the board spent a lot of time talking about the third grade cohort now going into fourth grade. There's less of a concern about that group, and I'm just reminding you of past conversations. And certainly answering the other questions. Yes, Charles.
The average class size at John Reed relatively the same? You could actually.
It's at the upper end of it. That is in our enrollment presentation from some time ago. Or was that in the report as well?
It's in the report for tonight.
So you can see the cover page of the John Reed Board of Education report. You can see the class averages. So it's, I would say it's more at the upper end of the range of variance. But it does vary a bit by class. You can see, for example, that grade French is a small class, and in the performing arts, there are a couple of smaller classes, but in general, upper teens is what we see, which is perfectly appropriate.
Well, is there a concern by saving money now by reducing the section, but we're setting ourselves up to spend more on intervention later?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, right? So I think that we wish that we knew. We wish that we had a better handle on the timeline for providing appropriate response and intervention for students who have struggled specifically related to the pandemic. They are responding to intervention, but the intervention numbers this year have remained high. I can't say that fall to the mid-year point, we've seen a drop off. We've actually seen more students need intervention because the curriculum marches up, the benchmarks remain the same. So for right now, there's a higher level of need, and that higher level of need has remained constant. So I think that we would be unwise to think that this is going to be a very short-term fix. I think we need to assume that throughout all of next year, we're going to need to provide a higher level of intervention, and smaller class size is probably the most effective way to do that, because the fewer students in each class, the more attention that each individual student can receive from the teacher. And honestly, that is probably the most important thing in terms of relationship building, right? We want our students to be able to identify a trusted adult. And so rather than taking a student who might be struggling academically or socially emotionally, rather than pulling that student out, having them be in smaller class sizes where the teacher can provide small group targeted instruction is a more effective way to provide that.
So effective in outcome and probably cost effective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so with that in mind, that would be a recommendation for smaller class sizes.
So if you make no change tonight, you're at 25, you're at the status quo.
The only change to status quo is right now we have 5 sections across 5 grades. Next year we would drop 4th grade to 4 and flip 3rd grade to 6, probably with keep 25 sections. Distributed to the administration prerogative to maintain.
Right, from a budget
Yeah,
perspective.
and as we've talked about before, keeping that, if there's any decision about a change in the number, allowing the administration some discretion to decide where that falls.
We'll know a lot more about enrollment in August than we know now.
There was assessments done, right, in January, we were gonna look at to see if things, is that where you're describing?
So right now, from what I'm seeing from my analysis of the mid-year data, it appears that the need has either remained constant or it's actually increased in some cases.
Why do you think that?
Because as I said, the curriculum continues to go on. We don't stop entirely to address the needs and the gaps in learning, because not all students are requiring extra interventions. So certainly the guidance that we've received from the state is that we should continue to move on, and certainly the curriculum spirals. So we provide intervention to students who need it. But rather than stopping altogether and then potentially losing students who are excelling, right, because we're then addressing the needs of students who are struggling, we are continuing to move forward and then providing additional intervention to those who need it.
Am I correct in remembering that this is also the time of year where we see a lot more referrals to PPTs as those January evaluations come back, and there start being questions both from families and other places about whether or not, particularly the 3rd, 4th grade side, we start having those conversations.
Around report card time, we tend to get more questions about additional supports for students. But I would say that in the last year and a half, our 504 numbers and our IEP numbers are significantly higher.
The IEP numbers are just the referrals to PPTs.
Both.
Would there be, I'm sorry, would there be any cost benefit to adding another para to the larger class sizes?
The problem in
adding
doing
another
that-
section?
Yeah, so in doing that, you would really need to add a paraprofessional to every single class. So no, it would actually cost more money because you'd be putting an additional non-certified adult in every single classroom. And so that costs more. So if you look at 5 full-time paraprofessionals or even part-time paraprofessionals as opposed to 1 additional section.
Why would you need to add it to all 5? I mean, if we're talking about it just in the higher class number, 4 classes, in other words, if the other class sizes fall below the threshold of needing 1, why would you have to add to all of that?
So potentially, what you were talking, you could hire a paraprofessional to float around the classroom.
Effectively.
You could do that, but know that the way that the schedule is set up is that all the classes have math at the same time, they all have reading at the same time, they all have writing at the same time. So if we're looking at a particular grade level, it would be really challenging for that one person or even two people to make it across all the classrooms during the time when all the students are going to need the instruction. So what would happen is that then that person would potentially need to pull students to provide, let's say, additional reading support, and then the student might miss science or social studies.
There's no way to flip flop the schedules and make an adjustment that way.
It's challenging, yeah. So we have our literacy support team and our math support team really descends on each grade level because the schedule is designed in such a way so that students, to the best that we can, they don't miss another subject to receive intervention.
Each class is still, because they're not doing like 25 and 16, it's gonna be 21 across all 5 classes. Students, that, or picking one up. So then each of those classes is gonna be.
Correct, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. It's not out of the question to do it that way. It's not my recommendation. I think that the students would be better served by having a teacher who can establish that home class community and have smaller sections across all classes.
You're also assuming you could find 4 paraprofessionals or 5 paraprofessionals.
And especially if we're talking about part-time. It's very challenging, as we've seen this year with some of our postings for the grant funded positions.
So it sounds like the most effective and cost-effective solution to keep it 25 was the recommendation from the board.
We talked about the possibility of cutting a section, and I believe at the meeting when we discussed that, I think it was workshop 2, one member of the board, it might have been Stephanie, questioned whether we should go up to 26 sections.
I guess to Sharab's point, it says recommendation reduced to 24. Is that the administration's recommendation or is that not the?
That was from the second workshop, right? That was from the second workshop when we were discussing this.
So the actual recommendation is to keep it at 25.
Correct.
Talk about the other things.
Okay.
This would be our last.
Sure, that's right. So now this just gets to our sandbox, which this slide is an example. And actually, I'm just going to take you there. So just as a reminder, these are the sample items that we talked about as possible cuts. The reduction of one bus, $61,515, and the reduction in tuition is $98,000. So if we go now to this might be a little bit. This is the spreadsheet that you should be all familiar with at the moment. There's a tab at the bottom, sandbox on that tab. And now this is where we can add reductions. You can see here that in column D2, our budget is currently at 3.2%. And if we add a reduction amount in, then it's going to adjust that amount. So if we go back to this amount here and reduction of type 1 bus, 61,515. We type this in, 61,515. This is type 1 bus reduction. You can see that our budget goes down to, just refresh this. $4.05. Okay, I presume everyone would be willing to recommend that as a reduction for next year.
Yes. Sure would.
Okay, the next reduction would be known outplacements for 98,000.
We'll take it.
We put that in. 98,000. Reduction.
Better.
I feel like there's an option.
And so that takes us down to 3.62.
The other three options, I don't, can you describe what the impact of removing those would be?
The impact.
So like, I don't know what.
Substantively?
This
Yeah,
next
so-
four lines there.
Not the impact to the number, the impact to the actual.
What is it?
What does it mean for the school?
So we'd essentially be asking the principals to find $5,000 in instructional supplies, in dues and fees, in equipment. And I can tell you that those areas are pretty lean to begin with. I think they made a case for those items in our 22-23 budget.
I think without, sorry to cut you off, I don't think it's worth having a conversation about taking $10,000 out of professional learning curriculum work based on the prior conversations we've had and the reductions over history that have come to that line. I think it makes ultimate sense.
I have a question about the facilities projects. I know we've talked about them before. You got an email about the blacktop at the elementary school that is unsafe, not really compliant. And I believe they requested in the past 5 years to have it replaced. I don't know exactly how much it costs to fix a blacktop, but I would imagine it's not a ton.
Mike is a good.
Yeah, in the neighborhood of 30,000, but it would be a capital expenditure request that would be outside of this.
Okay.
Right, it's something that I would love to see done this summer, I'd like to see us go after.
It might also be a ARPA eligible project also, if the board were to so direct.
What's the process for, so I, we got an email about it, but what's the process for that to go forward? It's separate that.
The facilities committee needs to bring a list of capital expenditures to the board to vote on. And we normally come with a spreadsheet that has, hey, here's what we're looking at over the next 5 years. And here's what we're looking to get done this year. And that would usually be a part of the referendum from the town, a separate line item, right?
It can be, but it's from a workflow perspective, we'd have to approve a capital item. It would then work through on the town side for the finance to approve it. And they have various choices as to whether or not to fund it, depending on the threshold of the dollar amount from various revenue sources, some of which require a town meeting or referendum.
So do you remember what our deadline is for everything to get to the Board of Finance to vote it forward?
Well, it kind of depends what the everything is. As far as putting it
Our budget and capital expenditures, for example.
our budget, the original deadline was later this week. Now I think it's next week, but as a practical matter, we'll approve it tonight. It'll go to public hearing 3 weeks from tonight and work through the process that way. On the capital side, that's not tied to statute the same way the operating budget is. And so, in theory, there's some flexibility about that vis-a-vis what the Board of Finance Board is like want to do with respect to putting it on a referendum.
Or we could potentially do something at our April meeting that would make it, to their meeting in May and into the.
Right, and there's going to be, starting in the end of March, roughly, the ARPA working group will start receiving capital requests from different groups and different boards. And if we wanted to make one of those, blacktop is for ease of the conversation. That's an alternate source of funding from which we can tap. But it's all essentially a capital need that the town would be asked to fund, whether it's from that tranche or another.
Are we planning to have a discussion about, generally speaking, our requests from the board? Or?
I think we should, and I think that there's a broad facilities question about getting a handle on the needs in both buildings, and once we have a need on the handle on those needs, identifying that for which might be ARPA eligible or might be a priority for that, and sort of talk about what the different workflows are.
One other question. I think someone in here knows that I think we have larger problems with the roof area? Is that something that needs to be replaced in the next few years, and is it worth? Or I guess, how
What
much
is
do we need
this?
to do restoration versus do we have any larger roof projects?
Like, it is a Band-Aid. or-
Yeah, we put a Band-Aid on something.
Pretty cheap,
that's to be fixed.
I don't even recognize that. Do you recognize that, Mike? $8,200?
To repair, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
$800 isn't getting very far.
Yes.
A roof estimate is,
No, I know, that's my question. Do we have?
Megan, I think might have an idea.
That 8,200 should be, that's this matches the price to restore the roof at John Reed.
They're not RES.
Oh,
And when you say restore the roof,
to ensure that we don't have buckets of water in our classrooms.
yeah, I think that means repair to certain areas, so you're not having dripping water.
Flat roof maintenance,
Right. it's-
periodically, looking at the seams and whatnot.
Yeah. A roof replacement is $2 million,
Yeah, I know, that's what I was.
and so
That's based on
question
a
is
roofing
more-
contractor. I'm sorry, they came to look to say that we can get the job done and remedy the situation by restoring that roof.
and by remedying the situation, it means fixing the leaks
Up on
that's
top of
happening.
the roof to
Right.
do some restoration. of it.
that's not gonna change the fact that we're within a couple of years and need to replace the roof, it sounds like.
True.
Right.
But we have.
Well, I'm not disagreeing, I mean, buckets, I don't want buckets of water
I
either.
walk into the 8th grade ILA room, there's a bucket of water there right now.
Chris, does the budget ever set money aside yearly or annually to?
There's something called a non-lapsing account, which will allow us to put unspent funds aside for things like that. It requires an agreement with the Board of Finance. Board of Finance to date has declined to allow us to set one with it.
Sorry for being rude.
So I don't believe you need to go lower than the green lines, the kind of the, you know, if there, as you mentioned, you know, I don't think we should be cutting professional learning and curriculum work. Roof restoration is important if you want to correct leaks in a roof that we currently have buffers for. And Reading Elementary, we talked about that as a decrease. That would be a decrease from the status quo of 25 sections down to 20%.
We thought about trying it. I know it's not a great time coming out of COVID, but, you know, assuming that the kids are unmasked now, or maybe they're gonna bounce back faster than they, or we've been told they're resilient through this whole process. Is the tendency going to be that they are resilient, they will bounce back? To some extent. I know you're not seeing that yet, but we're still just coming out of this too.
Yeah.
They absolutely do.
We can certainly help. I mean, I do believe that children are resilient. I think that they are strong, and certainly we saw lots of happy kids today from what I heard reported from the buildings. And that will certainly go a long way in terms of children feeling a sense of connectedness. It will not erase the many days of law schooling that they had last year and some of the deficits that they formed.
No. That's the only number there that's really significant out of it.
Can you go back to the sandbox? Which is really helpful.
We're at 3.62.
3.62.
And for sort of clarity, to get back to one of the elephants sort of in the room here, which is employee benefits. This is standing pat on the 14.8-ish% increase in budgeting as against health insurance. And so we had talked at length the last time about various options with respect to health benefits. What I'm hearing based on the discussion about where we're going to land this year on health claims tells me that we're probably going to be in a position when we hit July 1st with close to nothing in the health benefits account. And I'm also hearing that we're looking at 5 figures of unspent funds at the end of the year, not mid 6 figures unspent funds. So it's sounding unlikely that we're going to be able to have a meeting in June where we direct $500,000 to refill that fund. We're going to enter July close to the ground on health insurance, and then have to rely on what we budget next year to pay all those claims without any sort of backstop.
One of our recommendations in a previous workshop was to take our health insurance budgeted increase from 14.78% down to 14%. And we list that as a possible reduction. And that's absent.
That's right.
Yeah.
So my concern sort of runs the counter. One of the proposed solutions, or one of the proposed discussion points, was engaging in bargaining conversations about moving over the partnership plan based on the projection from Brown and Brown that in fiscal 23, you'd be looking at a plus or minus $500,000 savings by moving into that plan. The fact that we're going to be at July 1st with almost nothing in the benefits account, to me, wipes out 100% of that savings. Because we're going to have to pay May, June medical visits when they hit July, August. And so we're going to have to budget that full $500,000 to pay those tail claims. Or $600,000 to pay those tail claims, depending on what we expect the claim fund to be. And so that creates sort of a budget neutral circumstance from my perspective as between those two options without factoring in any potential costs associated with bargaining the question. So that has me somewhat less attracted to a harried negotiation to try to save money if, as a practical matter, we're not going to have it to save anyway.
But if the expectation is when you're describing when we get to July, we'll have run out of money. That's assuming the money we're assuming will be spent for those months that you're describing, right?
Assuming we hit
Assuming it's
250.
$250 a month.
No, I know, but it's when we run out of money, you're saying there's gonna be a tail of 500, because when we're saying we're gonna run out of money, it doesn't account for the 2 months prior.
Right, because we're paying claims in arrears.
Okay.
So like you go to the doctor today, we're not going to pay it till May. And so you go to the doctor in June, he's not going to get billed to us until August, and that's next fiscal year. And so we're always going to have those tails.
So when we're estimating the 250, that's not an estimation of what we're gonna pay, it's what we're gonna spend.
It's-
We're gonna end up paying 2 months after that.
It's cash out in that one.
What Chris is saying is if we switch to save 500,000, it's not like June 30th comes and we stop paying for the old,
There's no claim.
Right.
Those
plan.
first 2 months are quite
we
expensive.
still,
Right.
right, because we're paying for the old plan and the new plan. We're just paying tail
It's like if
ends.
we went the other way and went from fully insured to self-insured, we'd have 2 months free, basically, until that hit. So at some point, they got the benefit of the head, and now we're going to have to eat the tail.
I'm just wondering, because the assumption when we run out of money is based on that spend, even if it is.
Right, the spend is based on a sort of cash basis in that month, not sort of an accrued basis. And so you're paying out whatever the bill is that month, and the bill for medical visits in May is going to hit you for that fiscal year. At least that's my understanding of how the account has been managed. I don't think we're encumbering as against medical services in June that don't hit until August. I've never understood that to be the process.
So when we're estimating 250 for May.
That's
we're
cash
assuming
out in May.
That's cash out in May, it doesn't include what we may have to pay in July.
It's not May liabilities, it's May bills that were for medical visits that occurred before that, but were billed in May.
Checks written in.
Checks written in May, cash out in May. So that's just I am not sold that it is not worth having a conversation about what the right long-term health benefit strategy is. But I don't see it as sort of the silver bullet to knock 2 points off in his budget, because it's gonna be a cost regardless. And so it becomes a conversation that can almost exist outside of budget, because in the first year you do that, you're gonna have to eat the cost regardless. And so, you know, we can have those conversations with our bargaining units over a period of months without it really having an impact on what we're doing tonight. Correct me if I'm wrong in that, Reed, that's just how it's sort of.
I wish you would.
I wish we were coming into the end of the year with $700,000 and could say this is a great way to buy ourselves out of self-insurance, but I don't think that's what we're doing.
Because in the future, does it have a positive impact? In other words, it may not affect next fiscal year, but what about the following?
That's sort of the $100 million question, because the projection was most cost favorable for fiscal 23. And then in the out years, those savings were diminished, both because the expectation was that the elevated claims would be reduced and the continuing escalation on the benefits on the partnership plan at 8% or more a year would wipe out those savings. And so we'd be having a conversation probably in fiscal 25 about coming back to self-insurance anyway. And so that's where there's a lot of transactional costs involved with it, chasing savings that are partially illusory and partially real. And
Almost never win by switching back and forth.
like I love the idea of getting out of the insurance game, but not if it's going to be long-term cost negative. And that's,
I think what the thing that Chris is saying would be beneficial would, there's no strategy, there would be no strategy around the health insurance number. It would, you know, they would deliver the number to us, we would plug it into the budget and
it is what it is, right?
there's only strategy around it right now because we're self-insured and because the almost $2.9 million number we're getting ready to plug for health insurance claims next year is an estimate.
Right.
I mean, it could be half that, it could be double that.
I mean, just for context, I think the Easton claims are projected to be $1.5 million this year, or something equally ridiculous. Ridiculous is the wrong word. But
Just 4 years ago, that they were way over budget, having to go back to their board of finance and ask for more
I feel
money.
like they went back 2 years in a row, asking
Yeah.
for hundreds of thousands of dollars because they were in our situation. And so, to a certain extent, we should be thankful that we're not in a, we're gonna run out of cash right now conversation. But
I think we're in a spot, and we're getting off the budget a little bit and into this year's operating. But we're in a spot where I think, because we're so close on, the regular budgeted items, that we probably should be conservative where we can be. If it's a question of, do we really need it for this year? We might not want to go after it. If
I think that, my understanding is Dr. McKinnon is starting to take that position with respect to spending, just to make sure that we get it.
Yeah.
Right, we put a soft freeze in probably 3-4 weeks ago.
Because the difference, what was the difference from 250 to 300 was the difference to say $500,000.
$50,000
Yeah.
But we can't plug any of those savings into that sandbox, is what you're saying, because it's just
Oh, yeah,
undetermined.
there's probably not going to be any.
The savings you get from switching. It's like,
I mean, you can plug a different number for health insurance in the sandbox, so, Brown and Brown has said put 2,896 in there, 2.9 million there, you could. We're even better.
What could go wrong?
We've done it in the past.
We also went into those years.
We also had great recent history.
Because as a practical matter right now, if we end up at zero, it's because we've overspent on health insurance by $500,000.
That we put in from last year.
Because you sit on a $480,000 reserve, you burn the budget and the reserve, you've gone over by $500,000. And so that's the present reality. And so if you say that you're gonna have the same burn rate next year you have now, we're under budget, even at the 15%.
Could we ask ourselves for So when Brown and Brown gave their presentation, they said this number is on the high end of what we would expect. We just want to make sure we don't go over. Do we just stick with that and then use the logic of, hey, we're being very conservative here? We optimistically think it could be much less.
I guess the idea is if you come back to earth with claims, you bank the difference and it builds your reserve back up. And from what I understand, Easton this year has such a rich reserve that they're able to budget negative year over year for their health insurance.
Right, getting back to this slide.
Ooh.
If you had a healthy reserve, then you could take more risk with your operating budget next year.
Yeah.
Right, so. Last week, we were in the sandbox for Easton. We were able to say, okay, what does 0% increase look like for health insurance? We had that number. Then we were actually going to be able to go below, let's go below 100,000. So we would type in 100,000.
Yeah.
Don't show us that.
But you can't do that. Your reserve right now is negative 83,000, not 700.
If anything, we were talking about putting in a negative 75,000 there. If we think there's a reasonable chance we're going to end up at a negative number at year's end.
There's been a lot of discussion on this board going way back about what is the comfortable reserve, and I don't know, we've seen the land at 500 million.
It's usually between 2 and 3 months claims, and as that number has gone up, so is that, so if you say between 2 and 3 months, now it's 6 and 900,000, whereas a couple of years ago, it was 2 and 600,000.
Make it back down.
They make it like that, right?
Well, that's not really a line item we necessarily manage either.
Say again?
That's not really a line item that you necessarily manage, it just kind of is what it is. You needed something there, something to go by, but in reality, it's just a placeholder.
Certainly, there's not a lot of management room when there's no reserve.
Right. That's the pity of
And the history is headed in the wrong direction.
Right, well, I'd rather say I had a savings come next year than one handout.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I'd rather end next year with $100,000 and $300,000 left in that account than be having this conversation next March saying, let's go ask the board to find $5 million to plug the gap.
And so it sounds like even the conversation for switching now at the time, those are cost effective.
I think that they are conversations that are always worth having to make sure that we understand what the playing field is and what those concessions would look like and what the overall picture would look like. And I can conceive of a circumstance where if we were able to model long-term financial benefit, that you have a conversation with the town and say, we're coming here for a one-time handout to buy us out of this program, which is going to give you a long-term solution, to avoid the fact that we have to basically budget 14 months over 12. I don't think this is the year that that's going to happen, though, based on everything else that is going on in the town side.
Yeah.
So, I would agree with that. I don't think the ATM is open.
Right, I would agree with that.
I think it sounds like there's some measure of consensus to leave the health insurance request alone.
Yeah.
Okay. So that brings us back to where we were and whether there is comfort around 3.62 or whether there's conversation about other changes up, down, or different.
What does 24 sections look like?
So
67, 77.
Are there any reductions on the middle school side that we can make? Class section size, class size, we're not talking about that at all. It's
Any
encouraged.
retirements that we might want to consider not rehiring over there?
We can say one middle school teacher retire, right?
Well, the issue in the middle
But
school
that's-
is always, the issue in the middle school has always been teaming. And because we have 4 grade level teams of, with the exception of 5th grade, 4 teachers in each, one of each core subject. Once you remove one of those, you've broken multiple teams and they no longer have common planning period. There's a whole trickle down effect. And so we've been very committed to keeping that for the past several years to avoid
So
the disruption.
structurally, it's very.
It's structurally disruptive, and then as enrollment comes back up, we're gonna need them anyway.
And the other key thing here is one of the core principles of a middle school environment is that the students are in teams, and the teams help students to be connected to a smaller group of teachers, and it allows teachers the time to stay focused on sort of a home group of students. So it's a transition from elementary to middle to high school, which is then entirely departmentalized. And there's no sense of sort of a teaming structure. So the teaming structure allows when the teachers have common planning time, they can come together and they can talk about a small roster of students as opposed to the math department getting together and talking only about how students are faring in math classes. It allows them to look at really the whole child as opposed to just single.
I think that's why primarily when we talk about middle school headcount, we've talked about it in terms of FPA, foreign language, and other sort of core teams folks, and the extent to which there's any space there. I guess another question on that point, just to make sure we're doing diligence on the middle school question, is when we have some of the smaller cohorts going through those teams, we've talked about how you don't need to run 5 seconds of social studies because you can run 4 and then free up that teacher for another assignment in Dr. Mori's old 4+1 model that we tagged, or provide opportunities for intervention or other things. Does the flexibility of those assignments allow us to reduce the load or FTEs on interventionists somewhere else if we're reallocating those to core teachers?
At the middle school level? Sure. I don't believe so. It's something that
I think our interventionists and our specialists have a unique skill set. And part of that position is also coaching into classrooms, which can alleviate the intervention load as well. So I recognize what has gone on historically in the classes that have either been created or for support. So because of our lower numbers in some of our grades, where you don't need to run 5 sections and you're running 4 sections of a social studies or math class. For next year, we're creating an academic achievement center. So we're going to have available an academic support class every period of the day so that we can continue to intervene and support students, whether it's on executive functioning skills or to support them in some academic content areas. So we're providing more consistency and more availability off team when kids also need that support.
So with that, this is interesting to me. So if you're in an ILA class, let's say, is that an opportunity for the student to say, I'm going to go to the academic support folks right now, but there's a work, I'm supposed to be writing something at my desk, whatever it is. I'm going to go down the hall to Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so and work with them. Is that sort of the idea?
Could be. There are various reasons why a student might access the academic support center, and there are more specific reasons why they would access a literacy specialist, for example, or a math specialist. There are other scheduling considerations that we're working on too.
What about positions that aren't teachers? Like school psychologists, that sort of
We
thing?
only have one. You have one school psychologist. And we have a point 2 that is also pushes into chat, right? Point 2?
Yeah.
And then we have one social worker and 2 school counselors, and each of those school counselors have 2 grades each.
And when I was in school, I know.
It's a different world. I didn't have those when I was in school either, and I can tell you it's a different world, and their time is maxed out.
Somehow I survived too, and so did you.
I know I could have benefited from some time sometimes with some of those folks. So I think kids today are in a completely different world, especially coming out of COVID.
When we get into conversations about like the middle school schedule and the number of sections and class size and support positions and so on, that's where you're kind of bouncing on a tipping point, and you start thinking about quality, right? Can you make these changes? Perhaps, but really a high quality Durgay school system has these supports in place, and it's thinking about quality, thinking about performance, thinking about achievement, thinking about giving a new leader like Megan, who's been here this year, the opportunity to change the way you've always done something. And to think about a way to do something better, that's actually gonna be value added.
Okay, so what is it?
What is what?
The value add and something that's better.
Well, first of all, I don't think you want to have the conversation in Easton and Reading about what is the bare minimum. I think we need to have the conversation about how do we take where we are now, how do we get better? Because when I look at Easton and Reading, and I've only been here for 4 or 5 months, I see you underachieving school systems around us. Right? I think we talked about that in the student performance.
This is the concern, I think. We're
Right.
spending more and we're still rating very low. So while I respect all of what you're saying and that we should be achieving more in terms of what we're giving our students, we're not getting more. I don't think, I mean, we still rate the lowest, don't we? Very low.
Well, I don't think you rate the lowest. I think that you could be doing better.
Right.
And the argument about doing better with less is flawed. Is flawed.
So we talked about this at one of our previous meetings. And, Reading over the last decade has gone through substantial budget cuts. And this was before we were on board, but we moved programs like Gifted and Talented and other, various teacher and staff positions. So now we're in a position where the students have gone through, immense change and, negative situations, negative experiences in the classroom. So to talk about taking away more staff from them, I think right now, and we know that we're in a position where the student population is likely to grow in the next 10 years too. So if we're to remove staff positions, I think that puts us in a very dangerous position when we get, new students entering the school system. How do we support them? Plus, we have all of our existing students who are struggling. We've got these increases in the special education system. So just the idea of removing staff that are educating the children right now makes me extremely uncomfortable.
I think we should also talk about, when we're talking about we're spending more, we're not spending more on education, we're spending more on gasoline, we're spending more on transportation, we're spending more, like, that 3.62% increase isn't like, oh, we're getting, more spending on those kids' actual education, we're dealing with all these other ancillary costs of just running the school.
So what are we doing different than other school systems that are rating higher but spending less?
That's a good
What are we
question.
doing wrong?
I don't think they're spending less. I think if you look at the school systems in DIRG A and you look at their leadership structure and the way that they provide support to their students and the way that they provide professional learning and curriculum development, it is through a much more comprehensive and developed system that includes, a dozen more positions, literally. And so I know that Chris and maybe Mike would remember years ago when Dr. McMorrin and I did presentations and we had the visuals with the little human beings across DIRG A where you could see there's this many people in this position. And we are skeletal in comparison to DIRG A, our DIRG A counterparts.
So I think it may be helpful because you guys are, I think, talking about per pupil cost as we're spending more, right?
I would say yes.
So I think it would be helpful for me at some point to go over how we're calculating those numbers to make sure we're looking at a normalized apples to apples.
Well, those are numbers provided by the state, not by us.
No, I know, but we can look at those and analyze those articles after, right? When I look at
They
it.
are, they're K through 12.
So we've had this argument before.
We're not-
I don't want to waste a lot of time on this argument again. The state reports what the school district's input, and what the school district's input is based on different methodologies with respect to budgeting and accounting, including but not limited to things like workers' comp insurance, property insurance, MERS pensions, things that we carry that other towns don't carry. And that's $750,000 but at the top. It also doesn't do anything to normalize things like Weston having a single centralized school campus and Reading not, which changes the way transportation works. We've talked about buildings that are from 1948 in this district, we've talked about buildings from 2005 in Easton. there are all of these factors all go into this. Just like in Reading, we're budgeting $1 million for outplacements next year, and Easton are budgeting $110,000 for outplacements. It's not because we're doing it differently. In fact, it's the same folks who are making the decisions about where those expenses are going. And so to say that there's something per se wrong with the fact that we're meeting the needs of the infrastructure and the geography and the students with special needs, it sort of brings hollow to me, which is why I think Shirag is trying to say, if you're going to have this conversation, you do it on an apples to apples basis. And the state data is so rough in that respect that it doesn't provide that.
So aside from the we're spending more but getting less conversation, we put that kind of in the parking lot for a second. If you just considered, let's just take this example, right? When students take smarter balance assessments, which are reading, writing, and math assessments in grades 3 through 8, right? Let's say you take the percentage of students in grade 7 that reach a certain goal, and goal is identified in 4 levels, right? And so you want your students either meeting the goal or exceeding the goal. And so the criteria you look at is what percentage of students are meeting or exceeding the goal. Because we have students who are meeting the goal and we have students who are exceeding the goal. And we also have students that are below standard, below the goal, right? So let's say, for example, that 80%, or this one particular student, the goal is 80%. And we have a student at 71%, okay? What do we need to do to move that student from 71 to 80? That is a really good conversation here, right? I think that's a conversation that we're all interested in having.
I think that's the question I'm asking.
I think that's what you're asking too. Yeah, no, I think that's what you're asking.
And I want the best education for my children in this school
I know you.
system,
I know you do. So I think if we reframe it from what we're spending versus achievement, and we just think more about achievement, right? There are research tested and best practices to support a student who's getting a 71 and to get them to 80. There are multiple ways you can do that, right? One, you could argue, is that you could do that through class size. If you keep class size at a manageable level or at a lower level, you might be able to say that the teacher can provide more individual student support to a student to get that student from 71% to 80. Now, that student at 71 may also be eligible for additional support. So Megan described the idea of being creative with the master schedule next year and building in either advisory periods or extra support periods. So if I'm at 71% in reading and I should be at 80%, one way of getting there is through extra help, right? And so if we keep the class size and sections where they are at the moment, it might give Megan and her team flexibility in the schedule to make some changes, right? To add that lab class in. Or it could be that we have a reading teacher that is certified, not just in history or math or English, but as actually certified as a reading interventionist, which we do. And that student could get pulled out and get additional services one-on-one or in a small group. And that could be a way to get the student from 71% to 80%, right? And I think what Stephanie was alluding to is that the districts in our area, they already have class sizes that we have, okay? What they have more of, and I can probably give you some data on this, is they probably have more interventionists, more support systems, and they might even have more built-in time in their schedule for a student to go to a different place to get additional support. And what we used to do in the state was keep track of this data very well. But that was disrupted for a couple of years because of COVID. And we just did this, the assessment again last year. But there was data that the state kept on. It wasn't just the percent of students meeting their reading goal, it was also the accountability index, which we'd probably like to talk to you again about soon. But the accountability index is kind of a constellation of indicators, like 15 different indicators, and you take all of those indicators together, and it kind of gives you a return on investment, right? So if you do all of these indicators well, then you're going to score higher on accountability index. And I can tell you that Easton and Reading are outscored in those other areas as well. And it's because you don't have the number of interventionists and support staff, right? So there are many ways, I guess in conclusion, there are many ways to move a child from 71% to 81% to 80%, but it's about class size, it's about interventionists, it's about creative scheduling, it's about all of those things. And when we get to the point where we are now about taking those supports away, then that provides greater distance between where we are now and the other quality school systems in our area. And we don't want to expand that gap, we want to shrink it, right?
There's sort of a few takeaways from that, from my perspective. The first is it relates back to some of the comments you've made in the past couple of months about strategic planning and top-down sort of curriculum leadership.
Right.
And what that does to influence the 71 to 80 among other things.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think that before we're here sort of lamenting an absence of staff, we're saying we could really use more interventionists. It's helpful to have the conversation about where do we want to go, why do we want to go there, and how do we get there? And because some of the districts you're describing that have a ton of interventionists and all these other things, there's a scale issue too. I mean, we're not educating 800 students in the middle school, we're educating 350 students in the middle school. And so the sort of interventionist per pupil almost is, you know, the caseload is a factor in all this too. So it's not pure bodies as much as we'd like to just throw every talented person in the world at it. It creates a, you know, cost imbalance.
Yeah, I think about your budget right now as the foundation of a house, right? We're not really asking for anything additional next year. But it's important to maintain that foundation in order to build the walls and build the programs and the things that go on top. If you weaken those walls now, it makes you difficult to close the gap to where we are, right?
So I think we got here because I posed the question, I think Julie posed the question about reductions in middle school, and I sort of turned the question to outside of the teams, which we don't want to touch, what availability is there? How can we be creative? Where can we take things down? And I asked that question largely motivated by a comment that Mike made a month or two ago, which is basically completely fair. Every year we talk about elementary school.
Right. If we have 190 staff, if we talk about these 25,
it's the easiest place to go.
Yes.
All these are important except this third grade teacher who we can take or leave. This is a very myopic view of a large staff. And so if we're going to walk through the conversation about 24, 25, and 26 elementary school sections, we should make sure we're also having a conversation with leadership.
I understand. Yeah,
Are we doing what we need to here?
That's what started the conversation. I think.
And somehow we got to here.
Yeah, no, but having a conversation about your strategic plan is really important because your strategic plan could include how do we improve student achievement and what positions do we need and what that class size should be. But that also, you know, John, you're raising a good point about fiscal responsibility. I think that's absolutely key. We could look at operations and how we're spending money as part of our strategic plan and talk about ways we can be more efficient or talk about ways we can think about healthcare in different ways. We're not just talking about student performance. A strategic plan should have 4 or 5 different major categories. And within each of those categories, there are goals and action steps and accountability measures and timelines that we put in, right? And maybe as a school district, we want to do more of something. We want to emphasize more art or more music or more mathematics and science. Maybe that would come out of conversations that we have about.
And how can we leverage technology to expand programming without having to take another?
Right, and you know, there might be ways in order to make those improvements without actually putting dollars there, right? Just means what are we prioritizing right now?
If you ask my wife, she'll tell you, I have no problem spending money. She used to say it, trust me. But there's a part of me, there's a part of me that feels like I just crawled out from underneath the rock because I looked at my 5th grade class picture just last night for whatever reason. And we had 29 kids in it. And they all graduated. I remember every one of them throughout high school. I don't know what they did after, but they all graduated. And they all graduated at various levels, I'm sure, but I knew most of them, and they graduated fine.
Yeah.
And then I also went through, you know, as we're going through the budget process, all of the staff. I'm like, I don't remember all these people when I went to school. I'm not saying that it's needed or not. I really don't know.
Right,
Again,
right.
I just feel like, you know, when the phrase was coined, it takes a village to raise a child, someone at the top took it to heart and just hired an entire village and put them in these buildings. Because it's so much more than what I grew up with.
Well, the village is much smaller than it was 15 years ago.
In this district, I mean,
Almost.
yeah. We used to have some scale where we could spread those things. You know, when you say there's been reductions in budget, you know, we chased the enrollment down for years, you know, trying to right size. As enrollment was coming down, we were trying to right size the schools, right?
Talking about 4 and 5 sections in elementary school, it wasn't that long ago, we're talking about 6 and 7 sections in elementary school.
Yeah. Jason, you know, before we're talking about the future, you know, in the future, maybe we're taking a more holistic look at staff and not just the 25. Here you are, I think you're trying to, you know, explain the academic world to a bunch of private sector people. And, you know, I just realized when you put the 75 to 80 or 71 to 80 on the board, you know, one of the things that's missing is that, you know, a tie into a goal. The goal is nebulous, you know, like we're going to do better, you know,
More better.
What? More better. But, you know, if this were a private sector exercise, it would be, hey, we need 24 million. And we're going to, you know, our goal that we're going to coalesce around is going to be this right here.
Yeah.
We're gonna, you know, we're gonna achieve X on NWEA and Y on, you know, the standardized testing, and we're gonna, you know, we're gonna graduate, you know, 10% out of Jen Del Conte's group into the, you know, mainstream. Boy, I tell you what, I don't know about you guys, but that would help me a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like here's the team, here's the resource I need, and you know, as a leader, you know, for you to have a, you know, a concrete goal that you can bring into the building over and over. I mean, I know how I do it at work. You know, it's very similar. Once we set it at the beginning of the year, it's like, all right, you know, we check in on that goal all year long, but there are numbers attached to it.
Yeah,
You know,
we, at the beginning, in October, when we presented the data, I also presented kind of school improvement plans. And I presented it in terms of a spreadsheet that had 6 or 7 tabs down the bottom that had goals for student achievement, it had action steps, it had timelines, and we started meeting with the administrative team and going over that. And what I realized is that that's what we need to do we need to do that work, like 71 to 80. What is a realistic timeline to get from 71 to 80? Is it 3 years at 2% a year? And that's what you're looking for. And that's exactly what we need.
just something that each one of, you know, there's 190 folks in the building, you know, obviously they're here to support children and make a living at the same time, but if they also had that goal, like what we, you know, we took a header in the pandemic and we went down by X in math and Y on reading. And we're gonna gain 50% of that back this year, and we're gonna gain the other 50 back next, you know, whatever the goal is. I'd love to see that. It would really help me with the budget.
I don't think you're, and you know, look at a 3-year plan, we're talking about investing. We have to show the town what we're investing in and prove that those outcomes came to fruition.
Put that next to the number would help.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's not just for us.
Yeah, not just in the area, not just in the.
And I see Jason sort of partially smiling, because I think this is speaking his language.
Oh, I can see you doing it.
Yeah, right.
I can see you doing it.
Yeah, I think we, absolutely. I think it's part of the strategic planning that we need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very eager to dig into that at sort of district level strategic planning, and when Dr. McKeon joined us, the year had already started, right? And you might remember he arrived to a number of rather significant facility issues that required his immediate attention, and then we jumped right into budget season. So,
Lightning only strikes once.
but that doesn't mean, I mean, let's remember that every year our buildings set SMART goals, measurable, attainable goals, and every one of our teachers also create student learning objectives and goals, and they have action plans related to how they meet those goals. And they set those goals in fall. They check in with their building leader or department leader mid-year, and then they look at the end of the year performance. So the teachers in every single classroom are very much doing that work. I just don't think it's especially visible to the Board of Education, but that's good work that's going on every day. I think that the layer that we want to add is sort of that district level strategic vision that provides the umbrella for the work.
So as eager as we all are to move into strategic planning, we still need to adopt a budget for next year. So it all circles back. Mike, what's you want to do?
I just want to do two things, but I don't want to forget or forget anything else. First, I want to thank Megan for that right there. That, I don't know if that seems easy to you, but that's revolutionary on this side of the table. You don't get that very often.
Got it, everybody.
Get it every month from me.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just pointing out that it wasn't what we got in the past.
Yeah.
It was years of requesting, and now it's just kind of a routine thing, and I like it.
Can I respond to another one of your questions, though? I just
Yeah.
want the specialist that John Reed. I just want you to know how impressed I am with how they look at data and how we as a school are looking at data. So when we took the NWA test in the fall, we looked at those score results and we had a conversation, we drilled down and we said, how do we get kids who are at the 1 to move to 2? How do we get the kids to move from 2 to 3? The 3 is meaningful. How do we get the kids who are right here to be excelling, right? And we can talk about that where I can present that, but we were so impressed by a lot of the work of a lot of our students on their performance on the most recent, and there's still work to be done, no doubt, because of COVID. But I just I want you to be aware that those conversations are happening at that level where we are looking not only at the overall score that kids receive after they take it, but we also can drill down and look at where the areas that there may be some deficits that just we need to close some gaps that can make a really tremendous difference in our overall performance. So those conversations are happening at the building level, and I didn't want to be remiss in allowing that conversation to end without you knowing that, because our specialists are they're phenomenal. And I'm a social scientist, so I look broad strokes, right, when I look at data, and our specialists drill down and they're really phenomenal. And then we also look at how we can provide interventions in the classroom. So we look at student performance and we say, how much of this applies to full class instruction and how much of this applies to more specialized and individualized intervention work.
I'm happy to hear that, because I know in years past, I've sat at these meetings and I've said, I think to Stephanie many times, do we have the support we need to analyze data? I know there's data coming out our ears at this point, but are we actually processing and doing itself with it?
Susan Stewart is going above and beyond to be our data analyst as our math specialist, right? It's not typically something that is necessarily a job, part of her job description. She is masterful at it.
I don't want to come across as being the standardized test guy, but you could accuse me maybe of being the goal guy, right? And standardized tests may be the best way of going about setting a goal and then working together to achieve it. And I totally believe that you guys internally are working on those goals. I'm calling for it to be a little bit more public.
I agree.
Maybe boil down to such a way that makes it easy for everybody to get behind it.
We should have many goals related to student achievement, not just standardized tests. Standardized tests, we need that as well.
The other thing I wanted to ask, actually a question for Jen Volconti. Can we attribute the 98,000 or just a reduction in outplacement, your prediction for outplacement, can we attribute it to any one program that you've been building?
I think it's probably due some of the outplacements. You're always gonna have kids in outplacement. That's that's a reality, because we always have one or two outliers, so I think that would be to offset some of the others.
Like, can you say, like, bases is helping us keep our students in, or, you know, junior bridges?
I think the answer is yes, but as to the 98,000, I don't know. That's a different question.
Well, it's,
You're asking just about
I'm
the
just-
98,000.
so if we back up a couple of years, you know, we spend a bunch of money over on the special ed side, I think, building capacity so that we can offset and achieve that rate. And I'm pretty happy to see that number on the board. Yeah, it's the first, it's a backwards number or not. It actually brings us year over year down. I don't know that. We're backing off a prediction, but
I think the presentation, there is an estimate that it should bring us down a fair amount.
it'd be nice.
Right.
That's what we were hoping for, so.
But it's, yeah,
Sort of, yeah, I was just looking to be able to look back and say, hey, we built this capacity, and then
To answer your
it did
specific,
help us.
your specific question on tuitions and outplacements, the budget coming into tonight was up $16,000. Taking out 90,
Yeah.
brings us down 80,000, so year over year, outplacement tuition will go down.
Yeah.
So,
Are we at a point of saturation, or is there more people that we can bring in to bring that number down even more? Because I know when you bring things in-house, it's cheaper than having to outplace.
so can we invest more into it
Yeah.
to save long term?
it depends on the specific needs of the child, and so it's not like saying, if I fill 2 more seats, I can keep these 2 kids. That's the,
Right, a lot of more, but they do.
Yes,
right, I know, that's,
There was somebody making the point earlier that Weston has almost no outplacement because their district is in a size where they can build a program for almost every student. Is that true, the number you threw out?
well, I said Easton only has 100,000 in outplacement.
Is that right? I thought you said Weston.
So I was trying to specifically compare the same team, basically, across the Eastern Rite.
Is it just because they have less students with that need base, or?
I think it's a matter of having students where you can meet the needs in-house versus not, and we have relatively comparable programs, it's just a matter of who lives.
Same
in-house.
leadership.
So Jen, can we invest more in your programs to save more money long term? Or are you at the point where you're getting what you need?
We save more money when we have programs in-house.
No, what I'm saying, can we invest more in the in-house programs to save even more money? Or are you at the point where you have everything you need?
Well, right now, I think we have a sweet spot, and the reason why I say that is because we have to look at bands of students. So for example, if we were to look at a school, we really need to have X number of students to offset the cost of the teacher. So if I only have one student that needs this type of program, that did not help us build capacity. Or let's say we look at RES, and let's just say that I know that I've got 8 kids that fit a similar profile. Then run me to sit down with the building leadership and say, first of all, we have space to house it, and then we have the need, and then we look at a pipeline.
So you're maximizing efficiency as much as you can right now.
And that's why we were able to do the second bridge program, because we were able to identify that we had abandoned students, and we said, okay, here's where we can offset costs.
It's not just savings in programs. I think part of building the strategic plan that I'm talking about could be that we use funds in the district to purchase our own 12-seater van. And instead of paying $400 a day times 180 days, we purchase a $35,000 E250 passenger van, and we pay a paraprofessional stipend to transport students in district. So that could be a way in which we save, because transportation went $100,000 this year, right? So typically you need unexpended funds at the end of the year in order to buy things like that.
Or a
But-
fundraiser.
Or a fundraiser, or Region 9 purchases a van at the end of the year with their unexpended funds. And we pay Region 9 for the use of their van at a discounted rate. That would be a great use of, that would be a great use of funds.
Always happy to help you out anyway.
I think I'm not comfortable cutting anything else, so.
Another motion?
That are emotions.
The only thing left really significant is the 67,000, which is new class size.
I missed what you said.
The only thing of any significance was that 67,000 for reducing the cohort size, class size.
Yeah, I'm not
Increasing
comfortable,
it.
I just want to gamble that it's gonna cost us a lot more. The next two.
Anybody else?
No, we can talk about it, I just.
I mean, it's the only, again, it's the only thing of any significance, and if there's nothing else on the table, then I don't.
So in the interest of sort of moving it forward, at this point, we would be looking for a motion to adopt an operating budget for the year 2022-2023 of fill in the blank, an increase of fill in the blank, percentage of fill in the blank. And so, Sure, are you making that motion?
I am making that motion.
Please do and fill in the blanks.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second, Sean. Do you see that?
I can, so, I'd like to make a motion to, adopt a budget of $23,896,619.64, which is an increase of $835,581.64, representing a 3.62% increase over last year.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Hi, Steph.
Zach, hi. I think I was a little late.
Discussion on this motion. Steph, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. I definitely don't want to lose the teacher at 67,000. And I just want to say that I would support conversations about the kindergarten pairs, making them full-time. So I know that's not part of the budget. I just want to say that.
A pretty robust discussion generally. Is there any additional discussion on the motion that is on the board to adopt the budget at 362?
Yep, I support that.
If there is not, we'll call the question because it's hybrid. We'll have to call it in roll. Mike?
No.
Steph?
Yes.
Glenn?
No.
Laura?
Yes.
Julie?
No.
Sherrod?
Yes.
I vote yes, motion carries 4-3, and the budget is adopted at 23,896,619.64. Any additional comments after that?
No, thank you. Congratulations on passing the budget. The next step is to present to the Board of Finance, which I'm sure Chris will talk to you about. And this is
3 weeks from tonight.
This is not the final time we'll be talking about this budget or even that section of that teacher at Reading Elementary School or further than that.
So the conversation continues, but this is what we adopted at this point. And that's what we'll report to the town. So there being nothing further on the agenda, we'll.
Nice.
Yes,
Actually, can I make a motion to add it?
sure.
Okay, motion, that we move to first reading the, policy 5141.8 for the purposes of nullifying policy.
I'd second that.
So first reading of 5141.8 to nullify the policy.
This would be the mask policy.
The mask, this is back to the mask policy, okay? So there's a motion to add that to the agenda. And let's see. Any discussion on adding to the agenda? Or I'll just call the question.
I support that.
Mike,
Yes,
Steph,
we're adding it here.
John,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Sherrod.
Yes.
I will vote yes and carry 7-0. That brings it to the agenda. Laura, it's your topic.
So we've suspended the policy. I'd like to nullify the policy, given that voted that the terms of the policy are now obsolete. I'd like to push it to the policy group to determine whether something needs to be added to replace it, but I think we can nullify what's there right now.
So is there a motion?
Okay, motion. Okay, I'll make a motion to move policy 5141.8 to first reading for the purpose of notifying policy.
Second.
Right,
It's close enough, and to repeal the policy, basically.
to repeal the policy.
Yeah, okay. So it's Laura with a second from Mike. Any discussion? Seth, no, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the roll again. Mike,
Yes.
Seth,
yes,
none,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Gerard?
Yes.
I vote no, the motion carries 6-1, and the policy is accepted for a first reading. Any additional motions? Seeing none, that's the end of the agenda. Look for a motion to adjourn. Laura, second Mike, any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 9:17 p.m.